All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Saturday, August 21st, 2021, and this is your afternoon tropical update. Today, we are continuing to watch Hurricane Henri moving up the coastline towards the southern New England coast. Grace has dissipated in the mountains of Mexico, so we'll just show you that real quick. This is at the landfall last night, a long satellite loop of her trip across the Bay of Campeche. And well, last we talked, I said that she probably had hopefully peaked near Category 2 intensity as she was running out of time. Although Grace, you see in the satellite presentation, used every second of warm water she had before landfall at around 2 a.m. this morning in the central Mexican coastline and absolutely blasted the region as a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 125 miles per hour, almost a Category 4. Very impressive storm, and I believe nearly historic in this region, at least in the last recent memory of storms that have hit in this area. A very, very powerful hurricane as it moved ashore, and we're very lucky this thing ran out of water because it was going for broke before it made landfall. So a very hard hit there, but you can see Grace today very quickly dissipated over the mountains of central Mexico. Doesn't really matter how strong your storm is, it hits those mountains and it is done for. So Grace has been killed off by the Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m., although these remnants are expected to slip out into the East Pacific and reform a new tropical storm over there, but that would be moving away and will not be impacting land. It will be named a new name, I believe Marty, is what the latest name is out there on the Eastern Pacific side of things are, but it will not be named Grace. But that's it for Grace. And with that in mind, we switch to Hurricane Henri making his approach to the New England coastline, set to landfall tomorrow afternoon. So we'll go ahead and quickly show you those watches and warnings in effect. The Weather Channel graphic always does a good job with these. And you can see the hurricane warnings in purple, most of Long Island, and then parts of Connecticut. And tropical storm warnings are up for parts of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and then back through interior Connecticut and then over towards New York. So definitely a serious situation continues to kind of set up here. We have a hurricane that just it's not very often we get hurricanes up here. I actually said in a previous video it was an every 30-year event. It's more like an every 10-year event. It's a 10 to 15-year sort of thing. But still, hurricanes are rare in this region, and it's been a while since you got smacked with a hurricane. Um, Bob was the last true hurricane in the region, although we do have Sandy to talk about. You know, it was an extra tropical storm, but was functionally a hurricane. So, anyway, 5 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center actually is a mix of good and bad news. The good news is that the system has not really intensified that much today. It remains a minimal hurricane. It was a tropical storm yesterday, sure, but it was a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm yesterday. It's a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane today. We really haven't seen it take off. We talked yesterday, and we said a lot of computer models thought from here to here we would have a much different storm in our hands, but we really don't. The afternoon satellite presentation is sort of ragged. So our players here, we still have this upper trough that's cutting off in the jet stream and is trying to pinwheel Henri to the north. And then we have this kind of high pressure ridge kind of nosing in. So it's kind of stuck between these two weather features, and that's what's forcing it to make this turn into the coastline. But it's also sort of constricting the storm. You have you have great outflow in this region, both in this upper low and from the air being pulled out. This is perfect outflow, and then this is where all the thunderstorm activity is trying to collect where this outflow is the best. And you also have some outflow on the northern part of the storm, but you have very constricted flow here, and you have constricted flow here. So although divergence overall remains good for the storm, it really hasn't taken advantage of that yet, but it's still got a little bit of time, and we have some signs that strengthening may still be occurring before it moves over colder water. So this is an afternoon satellite pass that uses microwave technology to kind of x-ray the storm a little bit, and it's kind of faint, but there is a ring of inner winds beginning to form up here in Henri, the center right there, and then you see that little cyan ring kind of showing up, indicating that the storm is building a low and then sort of mid-level center on the different passes of the band. So it's not fully closed, but it's a closed circulation center. But you have the first workings of what you would call an eye for a hurricane trying to get started. But again, most of the convection is still off to the south and to the east, which is causing Henri some problems. The infrared satellite presentation is not very good. Again, you can see that core feature beginning to open up right here, but there's really not a lot of strong storms around it. You know, you have this little patch starting right here, and these will try to wrap around this eye in the coming hours, but it's going to have a lot of work to do to really get that much more intense. But it appears that structurally it's finally ready to intensify. So now the question becomes, well, how much longer over warm water does it have? And the HWRF parent model shows this pretty well. So this is right about the time we're recording here this afternoon. HWRF sees it at 978. So the model has the storm too strong. It has it far too strong for what it is. It's closer to about 990, 989 or so millibars, I believe. We can actually double check that, so I'm not kind of talking out my side here. And central pressure again, okay, so 991. So you can see this computer model is not close, but this does show ocean temperatures very well. So in the background here, you have your ocean temperatures. Anything in the yellow, 26, 27 degrees, will at least support a hurricane and often will support an intensifying hurricane. So you're going to see Henri move north, and it's got a couple more hours, but you can see here how it's going to cross into that colder water, and then by 9Z, which is about 4 or 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, you can see the system has hit that colder water, and then what you're going to see actually will back it up. So notice how the pressure drops to this point, 972. Lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. So this model expect intensification for the next about 6 to 12 hours, but then by tomorrow morning, you see how the pressure starts coming back up on its way to landfall. So it looks like Henri is going to have some time over that colder water to begin to weaken. You can see that shelf water cuts off right about here. There's a wall, basically is what we call it, where the shelf water will begin to drop off and it'll start to come down. And temperature, and that will begin to weaken the storm. And since there's no other jet stream influence, Henri is expected to probably peak tonight and then begin to weaken on approach. But it's important to remember that the system is a decent size and it's got a pretty good wind field associated with it. This is the earlier Hurricane Hunter pass. There's a lot of really strong wind on the southeast side of the storm, and this will eventually rotate up and in. Now, we unfortunately aren't going to get some new Hurricane Hunter data. The latest plane here, I believe, had to turn around and come back, so it's going to be a couple more hours before we can get. Oh no, I'm sorry. The plane that was going to go out has had to cancel their flight, so now there's another plane heading out a little bit later. They're just now getting underway to go investigate Henri. So hopefully we'll find out some more information about the storm. But for right now, it's going to be a couple more hours for getting the planes there to survey if Henri is improving. But I think generally speaking, you're going to see a little bit of an intensity increase, and this is what the Hurricane Center also sees. They expect an 80, 85. They had 85 earlier. They brought it down to 80. So a little bit more intensification in the next couple hours, then it hits that colder water. So Henri likely is going to landfall as either a strong tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane, but for now, those hurricane warnings do remain in effect. So let's go ahead and take a look at your impacts to come, as everything else is pretty much set. The only thing I would tell you today, track-wise, is shifted a little bit to the east. You have a slight eastward sort of jaunt on the track, but it's not that much, and not too significant. So we'll go ahead and start with the winds that are to come. GFS still showing wind gust forecast, 60 to 75 mile an hour, 65, 75 mile an hour along, especially the northern end of Long Island and coastal Rhode Island, coastal Connecticut, could definitely see hurricane force wind gusts. Again, even if Henri does weaken to a tropical storm and say it's a 65 or 70 mile an hour tropical storm as it's approaching the coast, wind gusts could still be in excess of hurricane force, which is no joke as far as wind speeds go. So, but I think it's important to point out not only at the coast, but look at the swath of tropical storm force winds that are going to go inland. I mean, you're talking about winds over 40 miles an hour pushing into parts of central and western Massachusetts, a lot of Connecticut. This kind of wind will really knock out power in this region. Rainfall still to come down a little bit in terms of little projections. There still is a good chance that a lot of folks are going to get 3 to 6 inches of rain, and this is no doubt going to lead to a serious inland flooding event. This area has had a couple flooding events so far this summer. The soil is saturated, the drainage systems are pretty full, and you're about to dump some really heavy tropical rain. Again, as I pointed out, when Henri makes landfall tomorrow afternoon, it's going to stall from 2 p.m. Sunday. It's basically at Long Island. 2 p.m. Monday, it's basically made it up into parts of New Hampshire and Vermont. That's not a lot of travel in 24 hours. It won't be till Tuesday afternoon that the system really begins to exit from the region. So you've got a storm that's going to stall and bring a pretty healthy amount of rain to this area. And 3 to 6 inches of rain, in Florida, Louisiana isn't that big of a deal, but 3 to 6 inches of rain up here is a lot in these urban areas. And especially since the soil is not ready to absorb that kind of water, Flooding is going to be the biggest problem with Henri, and this is compounded by the coastal storm surge, where 3 to 5 feet of storm surge is still expected from Long Island Sound all the way through Buzzards Bay and into Nantucket Sound. And this system is also going to be hitting um, during a full moon, so your tidal cycles are higher. I haven't actually checked the tides tomorrow, but if it hits at high tide, that's going to create a much higher water rise than what you see here, because the tides are a bit above normal now anyway because of the full moon, and then you have a storm hitting, and not even to mention that the tides in this region are a little higher than like down south. So if they hit at high tide, you can get some really nasty storm high tide, which is the storm surge and the tide cycle together. So a good bit of coastal flooding is coming. And if you're at the coast in these regions and you've been ordered to evacuate, there's a good reason for that. It's probably because water will threaten your life and your property, and you definitely want to get away from the coast, again, because like 3 to 5 feet, again, the Big Bend of Florida is like, well, we've seen that 1,000 times. 3 to 5 feet here with this kind of storm tide and things like that could really get nasty. So really needs to be respected and understood that the water rise of the coast could be pretty significant. And tornadoes are another threat. We have these tropical systems sometimes. Right now, the Storm Prediction Center, not too keen. They do have a marginal outlook for parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. But in their discussion, they're pretty tame on it. They're thinking that the highest dew points will remain offshore, so the atmospheric instability is going to be a bit more marginal than you again see further south. So right now, it doesn't look like a big tornado event, but a couple isolated tornadoes are possible with the 2% hatching for tornado probabilities. Not amazing, but significant. And finally, the power outages widespread through this region. Some of the power companies are already saying, y'all need to plan for several days without power. A lot of trees are going to be down, again, because those tropical storm force winds are going to extend well away from the coast. You're going to have a lot of trees down through Massachusetts, through parts of southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, parts of upstate New York, and then back through their main impact areas are all going to have a lot of power outages to deal with. So if you're in this region, you're staying, you prepare for not have power for a couple days until they can get that back online. It's probably going to be a mess for a while. So that's what I got for you guys this afternoon on Henri. We will try to take a look at it tomorrow morning before we finally get this thing ashore. But definitely on track. Thankfully for now, a little behind schedule in terms of intensification, but it does have some time tonight before it hits cold water. So it may make one final run towards the top end of Category 1, and then it will landfall sometime early afternoon tomorrow as a Category 1 or a strong tropical storm. And again, even if it comes back to tropical storm status, it's got a big wind field, and it's going to be strong, and it's going to be a pretty significant hit in this region that only sees this every so often. So please respect it, stay safe, follow local officials and local forecasts, and we'll talk soon. Have a good one.